To feed the family first.
We all have complicated lives. That is for sure. But I'm so glad you're going to be part of the new ATAG. Courtney Smith made the news tonight. She was on Fox 5 about the alcohol code. Mara Sticks did a good job.
Her presentation was amazing.
It was.
Don Gary, thank you, sir, for being here. And Jim Durrett is here. And we are 1 minute from the bewitching hour, and we will start on time. And Denise, glad to see you. Thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. Good to see you as well.
And Amber. It is 6:30 and we have 3 council people who can speak, and I seem to be the only one on the call. So welcome everybody, and we will go straight to our chair lady Valerie and then to our speakers.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here again. I appreciate everybody. I know, and I want to say in advance that I know that Sheriff Labette has to go quickly, but I want to thank you for being here again tonight. The first thing that we'll do is approve the meeting minutes from February 24th. And every panelist should have gotten that in your email sometime this week, if not by yesterday.
Motion to approve.
Second.
You have that recorded, Jim?
Rick Hamilton, motion to approve.
Thank you.
And all in favor? Raise
Aye.
your hand. Any abstentions? We're good.
Any objections? Hearing no objections, the meeting minutes from February 24th will be approved.
And then, Madam Chair, if I could just do the legal reading thing.
Sorry, I skipped you.
No, that's all right. Have this memorized by the end of these. This meeting of the Buckhead Public Safety Task Force is being conducted remotely as advertised and in accordance with the requirements of OCGA 50-14-1. The public may access the meeting via the link posted on Councilmember Norwood's city website as provided in the meeting notice published last week. All meeting agendas, recordings of meetings, and electronic copies of all presentations made to the task force will be available electronically on Councilmember Norwood's City Council webpage. Meeting minutes will be posted in the same place once they are approved as official at the next meeting of the task force. And I've gone through checking folks, Madam Chair, and we do have a quorum.
Excellent. Well, we can begin this meeting. Again, I want to welcome everybody who showed up here tonight, considering all that's going on outside the door tonight. And we have 2 really great presentations tonight. One is going to be from Ken Howard, the SAC of the GBI, Special Agent in Charge, for those who don't know what that means. And then we're going to hear from President of Formulytics, Tom Ratchford. And all of this is going to be about gang activity. And I imagine that even though we're the Buckhead Safety Task Force, this is going to have a lot to say about gang activity, maybe in Georgia and Atlanta and all the greater surrounding area. So the first speaker, as I said, is going to be Ken Howard. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Ken.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me this evening. And like the lady said, my name's Ken Howard. I'm Special Agent in Charge of the GBI statewide gang task force. And if you've got a copy of the presentation, which I think was provided, for you. I'll walk you through some of that. And if you have any questions about it at any time, I'll provide some contact information if you need to chat offline, or I'm sure maybe there'll be some time afterwards allowed that I'll be glad to answer any questions on things that aren't clear. But I've been in law enforcement now for over 25 years, that'll be almost 22 years here before long of that. I've been with the Bureau. I did 4 years with the Brunswick Police Department before I came on with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And now that I've landed here with the statewide gang task force, I can tell you that our task force is made up of, as you see, myself, special agent in charge of the unit, 2 assistant special agents in charge, 10 special agents, 2 task force agents who are members of local municipalities or sheriff's departments, one from the Spalding County Sheriff's Office, and an officer from the Atlanta Police Department assist us in our investigations with the task force. We also have 2 criminal intelligence analysts, 2 full-time criminal intelligence analysts. We have a part-time criminal intelligence analyst that works with us. And then we also have a full-time National Guard counter-drug task force criminal intelligence analyst assigned to the unit. We also have a prosecutorial liaison assigned to the unit full-time by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and that's Miss Lindsay Gardner with the GBI. So we've got a total of 19 investigative personnel, and we've got a presence right now in, throughout the entire state with our statewide gang initiative, both with this unit and with our regional gang specialists who are assigned to GBI regional offices. So that's a quick brush of what the gang task force looks like today. That's going to look different tomorrow. That's going to look different a year from now because it's a work in progress. We're about roughly 2 years old to date with this specialized unit. So if you look at your next slide, and I'm going to bring this on home to Buckhead here in a minute, so bear with me, and this is all going to come together. All right, we're going to take a satellite view, and then we're going to zoom it on down to kind of give you an idea of what our approach is to the issues and how we see the problem. So in thinking about what, as I tried to imagine, both through conversations I've had with some of the members of this task force and what I've been asked to present you here tonight, I started thinking about what are some issues if you're trying to address a crime problem in any area. What have I found to be helpful in the past in my career? And the first thing we've got to do is you have to assess the problem, of course. And once you've got a good mindset, or you've got your mind wrapped around exactly what the issues are that you want to confront, then we take that problem and we use targeted intelligence-led enforcement to specifically target the problem areas and the problem issues. And some of what I talk about, I'm sure you're going to see some connections there between what Tom Ratchford talks to you about in using that type of intelligence-led enforcement. And then we take, once we've targeted these criminal investigations, these criminal street gangs, we are very, very driven and very motivated to conduct superb investigations, which means superb documentation of those investigations so that we can provide a finished product to our prosecutorial partners around the state, and make sure that they've got something to work with, try to make their jobs easier. And then as a task force, as a special agent in charge of the task force on down to the agents working on the ground, we control what we can in these investigations. And we try to exert influence where we can in and around those jurisdictions where we work, where maybe the mindset of different communities, maybe some don't recognize the extent of the problem in their areas right now for whatever reasons. And so we try to spread the word and spread the message of exactly the problem as we see it, and try to share some of the solutions where we've had some success stories. So if you move on to the next slide, as we started looking at collectively as an agency and then through partnerships around the state of Georgia, we had to start trying to assess and understand what exactly is the crisis. What are the problems? What are the issues? And what we quickly learned through our own experiences, our own investigative collective experiences, and through our partnerships with our federal and local partners, is that to have a full understanding, we needed to understand how it's all connected, and we had to have a good understanding of how the international criminal street gangs, or cartels, as they're more commonly known, how they are connected to and work in coordination with our Latin and Hispanic criminal street gangs, with our prison gangs, with our white Aryan gangs, with our black criminal street gangs, and our outlaw motorcycle gangs. We had to understand how all of those separate criminal organizations work independently, but also how they are connected and how they work in concert with one another to further their own independent criminal empires, and help one another when it suited them, and what caused the conflicts and the violence between some of those gangs when their wants, desires, and needs came in conflict with one another. That's the third slide. So if you look at the fourth slide, what I've shown here, just so that, again, we're at this satellite view, and we're gonna narrow it and keep zooming down in for you. But to understand the true crisis, you need to understand our South American neighbors. And while I don't have an overall picture here included of Guatemala and Honduras and Panama and some of our other southern neighbors, I've included the map of Mexico here, which shows a current or the most up-to-date color-coded map of the different cartel influences, different criminal cartel influences in the country. Yeah, I'm sorry. Somebody have a question? Okay. And so you need to understand, people need to understand that our and the Mexican cartels exert a great deal of influence over our criminal street gangs here in the metro area, and of course in other states and around the rest of the state of Georgia and other states around the country. They're interconnected, and they exert a great amount of control over that. For instance, an example of just a simple example of that control is within our prison systems here, in the state of Georgia, the cartel street gangs, or the cartel connected Hispanic inmates, exert a great deal of influence and a great deal of power within our prisons. Even though they make up a smaller portion of our prison populations in numbers, they're able to control a lot of the criminal activities coming out of the prisons and being perpetrated out on the streets through their influence. Primarily, they have the money, they have the product in the drug trafficking world that makes the money for a lot of these criminal empires. And so that gives them a great deal of influence and a great deal of power. So if you move on to the next slide, this is a little piece of greater Los Angeles. I think you'll quickly recognize as you look there, and you'll see some names you recognize: the Beverly Hills area, the Los Angeles, Torrance area. But what I want you to look at or focus on here are the color codes you see there. Primarily the red and blue color codes you see there are indicative of the criminal street gangs exerting influence in those areas. And in my 25 plus years of law enforcement, what I learned early on and what's been consistent throughout is if we ever want to know in law enforcement out here in the state of Georgia what to expect, what criminal trends we can expect in our areas, oftentimes or most of the time, all we have to do is look to our friends out in California, and specifically out in the Southern California area. A lot of the trends in our area are influenced by what goes on out there, and that's certainly not just limited to criminal and crime trends. Pop culture and things like that, of course, have a great deal of influence, but there's certainly a great deal of influence with our criminal street gangs. from the California area. If you'll go to the next slide, just kind of depicted that here for you. The next slide should be a picture of the greater United States there, and you'll see the state of California there in blue, and you'll see the state of Illinois and the state of New York with some arrows pointing to Georgia. And the criminal street gangs, matriculated for the most part from California, from the west to the east over the decades. Now, look, understand that a lot of the issues we're seeing here in the state of Georgia they're being manifested. These aren't problems or issues, of course, that popped up overnight. That just came around in the last year. It's been building in the state of Georgia for decades, and in the metro area specifically for decades.
Ken, could you ask him to advance the slide maybe one more?
Yeah, there you go.
Now we're starting to get it. It's a gradual, so we need a few more slides.
Yep.
Let's
Sorry
see
about that. Go ahead.
If it will do the layers.
Yeah, a couple more, and then you'll
next
probably
layer.
be able to see that.
Next layer. Next
Again,
layer.
Yeah, just a couple more, and you'll see
There we
some
go.
arrows. Boom.
Now you
All
got
right.
it. Now you got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's a very general progression of how the gangs matriculated west to east and somewhat south over the past 30 or 40 years. A lot of the issues we're having out here now, if I talk to an old soul retired at this point from LA County or some of the southern parts of California, they find it interesting that these are issues that we seem to be just now confronting in certain parts of the state of Georgia, because this is old news to them and problems that they've been dealing with for a very, very long time. And if you'll move on to the next slide, we're zooming on in here. We're continuing to bring this on home and give you a general idea of what we deal with here in the state. The slide on the left there is, of course, the great state of Georgia, and you see a lot of green dots on that map. And then the picture on the right side of your screen there is greater Atlanta, metro Atlanta area. And you'll see a lighter dispersion of that same green. Now, what this is, where this information came from, is it came from the Georgia Department of Corrections. And they validate, for those that aren't familiar, when inmates go into the system in the Georgia Department of Corrections, if those inmates self-identify as criminal street gang members, or if investigators within the Georgia Department of Corrections identify that they are indeed criminal street gang members, then they will complete paperwork. There's a system behind all of this. I won't bore you with all those details. You can't just point your finger and bless somebody and say, hey, he's a gang member. There is a procedure that we go through, an investigative procedure that we follow, but they'll go ahead and validate them within the system. And they do that for several reasons, not the least of which is it presents a great deal of problems for our correctional facilities around the state if they mix certain criminal street gang members with other criminal street gang members. It'll lead to big problems within the prison, assaults and other issues. But there's other reasons they do that. One of the good, byproducts of that process is it's not a perfect system. It's not a comprehensive system of all of the criminal street gang members out there, but it's one of the most, it's one of the best we've got right now, and we're working on others. But this is their classification. So it's not all the criminal street gang members in the state of Georgia. It's not all the criminal street gang members reflected here in the greater metro Atlanta area or in the Buckhead area. It's just the ones that the Georgia Department of Corrections has validated within the system and then turned back out on the street. These are the people it's reflected here that have been paroled, that are out on probation. And this shows the area and criminal street gang dispersion around the state of Georgia. and in the greater Atlanta area, in the Buckhead area. So if you go to the next slide, and I say the area and criminal street gang. So on that last slide, that's there's several different gangs that fall under that Aryan umbrella, for lack of a better term. You've got gangs you may have heard of, such as Ghostface Gangsters, for instance, is primarily a white male-dominated criminal street gang, and they would fall under that umbrella. So the next slide is our, again, from the Georgia Department of Corrections, shows most updated dispersion of parolees, and this is our gangster disciples. And as you see there, state of Georgia, and then the greater metro Atlanta area, you zoom it on down in there and you'll see, of course, you can find Buckhead right there. I know it's in fine print, but you can look at the 75-85 split there and probably figure it out pretty quickly where Buckhead lands. You may start to see a trend here in the next couple of slides, starting with this one. So, you can raise your hand or say it out loud to yourself, and I'll say it at the end for you and see if we all spotted the same trend. So if you go to the next slide, this is a dispersion of Bloods criminal street gangs, same two areas of the, statewide and within the metro area. Again, Bloods criminal street gang is not one criminal street gang. It is a multitude of criminal street gangs with different names and different identifiers, which fall under the National Bloods umbrella.
We're actually looking at the Crips right now.
That's all right.
That's what-
We'll
okay.
go ahead and jump to that one. I saw they had
Okay,
the
good.
Bloods went up just before that, and so
Good.
there we're caught up. We're on the Crips, and just like the Bloods, the Crips is not one gang. It's not a gang. There are a multitude of factions of the criminal street gang that fall up under this Crips criminal street gang umbrella that go by different names, different identifiers, different ways of doing things, but they're all Crips when it's all said and done. So we have one more. If you go to the next, you'll see our Latin criminal street gang dispersion. Yep, there you go. I'll give you a second to look at that one. And so I don't know if you guys noticed it or not. I bet you did, but as you look at the spread, the dispersion of those criminal street gangs, I think you probably, if you were looking at the Buckhead area, you'll notice that there's not a heavy dispersion of those criminal street gang members per se in the area of Buckhead proper. A lot of these criminal street gangs are located south of Buckhead and or outside the perimeter in various locations in and around Buckhead. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have criminal street gang members in Buckhead. You do. I can assure you from our investigations. Again, this is not a comprehensive model, but it's a pretty good indicator of where these folks are at. The problem is that it's not. I don't think it's unique to Buckhead. I know it's not, based on our investigations, is that a lot of these criminal street gang members, they make forays, for lack of a better term, into other jurisdictions and into other states, and to commit their crimes and then retreat back into their home area or home base, for lack of a better way to describe things. So just because you don't have, as folks in Buckhead and folks in other part of the state well know, just because you may not have a heavy criminal street gang presence in your neighborhood or where you lay your head down at, they can have a tremendous impact on your quality of life, to say the least. And I know I'm preaching to the crowd here. So let's move to the next slide, which I know everyone is most interested in, or the next couple. And that is, I know you all know or have a pretty good idea of what the problem is, because you live it and you experience it every day, and and you don't need me or probably anyone else to tell you what the problem is. It's what do we do about it? How do we fix it? And so I'm just going to give you a couple of things, generally speaking, that we have found effective. It's the criminal street gang suppression slide. If you'll, it's one slide below the Latin. There you go. So I'm just going to provide a couple of general effective strategies, the way we try to approach the problem with all of the information that I just gave you. We just feel it's important to understand that this is more than just a local problem. It's more than a regional problem. It's a global problem that lands on our doorstep, and we try to approach it, target it, fight it, whatever you want to call it, from multiple platforms, using partnerships with federal and local law enforcement and our state partners around the country. So what are some effective strategies that we've come up with? It's a diverse approach across multiple agencies. I haven't seen that there's one end all, one law enforcement agency that's gonna hugely impact it alone independently. I think it's going to take multiple agencies working in concert. I think the most important thing to begin with is that we've got to provide the problem solvers, whether, in whatever jurisdiction, with, an assessment of the problem. Here's the problem we're being confronted with. Here's our issues, so that the people who are going to make the decisions know how to come up with a plan to target that issue. And then what's been effective for us is, once we understand that, is doing some of the basics, going back to some very basic things that for various reasons, it may be another day for discussion, that we've gotten away from in some areas, and that's enforcing the laws on the books. And that doesn't mean just the violent crime stuff, but quality of life stuff, the loitering, shoplifting, drug deals, drug distributions, working your way up, of course, all the way to the violent crimes. And we're working this at every level, from criminal patrol and specialty units up to complex investigations, because the things that the patrol officers do on a day-to-day basis, the encounters they have on the street with some of these individuals, the documentation of those encounters and those crimes that they encounter, actually we're able to go back and capture later in some of these more complex investigations, and hold these criminal street gang members responsible when we've got them caught up in more complex investigations for past offenses coupled with the current offenses they've committed, and expose them to harsher penalties within the criminal justice system. So the next thing is that we want to prosecute the offenders that committed the crime in front of us, but we also want to hold the gang responsible. So once we've identified the criminal street gang member who committed the crime, we identify what gang he's associated with, then we look to target that gang, investigate that gang, and hold as many members and associates of that organization responsible as we can for not just the crime that they committed, if they were involved in it in any way, whether that was the gun that they put in his hands to commit the crime, or it was the car they provided to commit the crime, or it was the resources to hide and flee from police after the crime. We want to hold all of those individuals responsible as a group and an organization, so that we can best paint the picture that this is an organization and not an individual. And we want to target the worst offenders using that intelligence-driven data. So I think that by intentionally and proactively sharing criminal street gang intelligence amongst local, state, and federal law enforcement officers, we're able to promote that type of interagency cooperation to accomplish these tasks. Which leads me to my final slide, which is just a repetition of the slide I mentioned earlier. That, we just want to assess the problem, use the targeted intelligence-led enforcement to combat the problem. Superb documentation on the part of the investigators, give them the tools they need to do that, the training to do that, and so that we can provide our prosecutors with the best most prosecutable product, and then influence where we can and control what we can. Now, then, if with that said, I'll leave it up to the moderators as far as questions or anything like that goes. And I know that's a real down and dirty and a short amount of time. You know, it's a complex issue that, you know, a couple of minutes isn't certainly going to answer all your questions and address your issues, but I hope that's somewhat helpful with what you guys are trying to do.
Thank you so much, Ken. I just want to ask any of the panel if they have any questions, because I think my questions need to be offline, actually.
I do. I'm curious, from the original chart that you showed from California to Illinois and New York, what was the draw to Georgia, or what is the draw to Georgia?
It's the same things. It's just as simple as the same things that attract legitimate commerce to the state of Georgia. This is a multinational, it's a multi-billion-dollar criminal enterprise is the way you have to look at it and understand it. And so they're using the same railways and interstates and Hartsfield International, you know, all of the things that legitimate businesses are using Atlanta for. Is the same thing that attracts these individuals. And then, of course, like any other criminals, in my experience, what you have to combat is that they have to be, you have to make them feel uncomfortable, because they're going to operate and thrive where they feel comfortable. And that's, you know, that's my simplest, you know, I know that's boiling it down and making it super simple, and that's not any slight against anyone. It's, you know, there's a multitude of reasons why they've been able to thrive for so long, and the world, according to Ken Howard, is certainly, you know, not to get too deep off into weeds of politics or anything else, doesn't mean I'm right, but you just have to be aggressive with these folks and these individuals. And that starts with a message to the community with exactly what we're trying to do here, what we're not trying to do here, and also partnering with our prosecutors and our judges to make sure that they understand what we're doing, and getting buy-in from those entities, because we can arrest and try to hold people accountable as we do. And a lot of law enforcement agencies around the state do it very well, but we can't control sentences, and we can't control, you know, prosecution all the time.
And a quick question. We don't see a whole lot of Bloods, Crips reporting in the AJC. Can you speak to what percentage of crimes in like the last year in Atlanta were committed by CSGs versus just lone wolves?
No, I wouldn't want to. I mean, I can't give you a specific number off the top of my head, and I'm sorry I didn't come prepared with that number, but that's a difficult, I'll tell you why that's a difficult number to give you. Is I can certainly give you the number of criminal street gang members investigated and arrested by the state of, or by the GBI statewide gang task force in the last year, given time to go grab that and get those numbers. But a lot of metro agencies and statewide agencies don't track criminal street gang arrests. They don't differentiate, you know, if the guy was in a gang or not. I can tell you that the number is much higher than whatever number you're going to be handed. Because it's just not tracked. It hadn't been traditionally tracked that very well. And that's something that we're trying to get our hands around right now as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Howard, I have a question. So we've been told in the past that usually the most dangerous gang elements are the younger ones that aren't really affiliated with a larger gang, where usually gang activity stays within the gang and whatever beef they have, whereas the younger ones that are starting a gang are much more of loose cannons and cause a lot more issues for just the public at large. But I don't know if it's changed, if those dynamics have changed since the last couple of years.
There is some truth to that. Anecdotally speaking, I can tell you there is some truth to that. And there's numbers that support that. I can tell you that one of the reasons for that, though, is that our, you know, criminals, even at a young age, criminals are some of the smartest people. You know, there's a lot of smart criminals out there, and they understand how the law works. They understand how to manipulate the legal system. They understand how to manipulate all of the programs that we've got out there for them to help them make diversions in their lives and to do, all of the things that we try to do to on the non-law enforcement side of the house that good groups, good people try to do. Smart ones know how to take advantage of those systems. And one of the things they do to take advantage of the criminal justice system is older criminal street gang members. They utilize the younger ones, specifically juveniles, those of a juvenile age, to commit crimes of violence and retaliations against other criminal street gangs or whomever they deem needs to be retaliated against, because they understand that they'll get a lighter sentence. And the way they entice the young kids to do that is by telling them, hey, you've got to make your rank. You've got to show yourself. You've got to prove yourself. And these kids buy into that because they want to get that status and rank within the gang. So there is some truth to that, but you can't discount the involvement at, the highest levels. These criminal street gangs are controlled by older criminal street gang members, more like organized crime mafia dons, like you would have watched on some of the TV shows we've all enjoyed in the past. These guys are living in Buckhead. They're living in the Lenox area in the high-rise condos and driving some of the nicest cars, if not the nicest cars in town, and putting on airs like they're something they're not. But they're the guys calling the shots and running the show. And they're the guys that we want to, those are the guys we target and go after from the bottom up, the middle up, down. We try not to leave those guys out there. And then finally, I'll say this, the one trap that people fall into that I just want to point out here is some folks will look at it like, well, they're just shooting one another. They're just retaliating against each other or hurting each other. But unfortunately, what we see all too often are those stray bullets that find homes where they weren't intended. And we have too many innocents on the streets, including in the Buckhead area within the last couple of years. I think everyone will remember the young girl that was killed there around Lenox Mall, who was not an intended target. That's not an anomaly. That's something we see quite often. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Thank you, Ken. Is Colonel Pritchett, are you still on here?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Do you have anything you want to add to this, or you have a question?
I don't.
You don't? Okay. Okay. I do. Ken, I just wanted to know, again, I only want to ask you maybe some general questions, but, with the limited amount of staff that you have, what success are you having in disrupting any of this gang activity in these areas that you showed us?
That's a good question. And I will be honest with you and tell you that I go home many nights frustrated and wondering if I'm trying to swim up a waterfall. We are certainly overwhelmed and sometimes feel like we're, trying to swim in a whirlpool or, call it whatever you want to. It's very overwhelming and frustrating at times for I think a lot of metro agencies and statewide agencies, and even collectively as we try to come together and work together on the issue. I would be surprised if a lot of our partners didn't tell you the same thing, that it just at times it seems it can be an overwhelming problem. But we have had some success. Again, remember, we've only been in the game now for about 2 years. And in that limited amount of time, we've taken down some significant organizations. We have solved crimes of violence, which otherwise would not have been solved. And so I know for a fact in a short amount of time that while we may not have fixed it, we've certainly had an impact in some families' lives and some local communities' lives with the progress we've made. And I'd be glad to give examples of that offline and talk about some of those cases with anybody. I think that with time, with education, like we're trying to do, and get this word out to metro agencies and continue to push this intelligence out so that others can work with it too and not hoard it, that we can have a greater impact. I also believe that at this point, based on what I know about the problems nationwide and what I've seen, that we're not going to eliminate it. We're not going to win, for lack of a better term, but we can lose. And so we've got to work hard to to push it back and then hold a line somewhere, in my opinion.
Well, I thank you for that response. Anybody have any other further questions for SAC, Howard?
You're all free to, I'm sure that I think it's Jim has my contact information and he's free to share it with everyone, and feel free to email me or call me.
Thank you for that. Well, if nobody has any questions, we'll move on to President of Formulytics, Mr. Tom Ratchford, and hear what he has to tell us about his company and his impact on gang influence in Atlanta.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, thank you for including me. Actually, I was planning to just spend a few minutes talking about the general gang crisis in the area. And even though I didn't coordinate with Ken Howard before, a lot of our comments are consistent with one another. So if you go to the first slide, and then the next slide. So I usually start in my conversations, and I've been working on the gang issue around the United States and around the world for about 10 years. And this is where I typically begin by saying that DOJ has, in their studies, indicated that gangs are responsible for about half of violent crime in most jurisdictions, and well up to 90% in others. And so we need that to guide us as we determine resources that we throw at this issue. Next slide. And as others have indicated, gangs are dominating some of the most important crime segments. Someone asked a question earlier for Mr. Howard, why are they coming here? And the answer is they're driven by economic factors. Atlanta is one of the fastest growing cities in the United States. It's economically vibrant. And so anything that can be appealing to make money, such as narcotics, human trafficking, fraud, extremism, all of these are components of the criminal factors in our state that they are involved in. Next slide.
Next, there you go.
And this isn't worth spending any time on. Everyone knows crime is bad in Atlanta. And when I speak to the issue, the question I think is not why is the crime bad, but what can we do to push forward and address it? Next slide. So I think the single most important philosophical component of gangs is that we are witnessing in Atlanta and in Georgia the evolution to traditional gangs versus non-traditional. And folks that have been in Atlanta for a while will remember that when we had public housing, there are very strong neighborhood gangs associated with Techwood and Bowen Homes. Those have been split up now that those institutions no longer are around. And this has led to the transition from a neighborhood concept to what I refer to as a national franchise model. And these new organizations have deeper management benches, they have stronger resources, and they pose a much more sophisticated threat to our community. Next slide. I use this simply to show a decade ago what we were looking at with the gang problem in Atlanta. And there was a group called 30 Deep, which is still around. They largely hailed from Mechanicsville. They had a very particular style of crime that they would commit, a smash and grab of high-end stores. And when they started to get active, local law enforcement could identify who it was, send folks to Mechanicsville, identify the leaders, and with some resources lead to a pretty quick reduction in the crime that they were generated. Next slide, please. this is what we have evolved to now. And Ken and I did not coordinate, but the map he showed of Los Angeles relates directly to this picture here. So these are leaders of a national CRIP organization out of Los Angeles. And the folks that are there, you'd say, well, why is Tom showing this to a group in Atlanta? Well, these individuals and the group behind them are all here in Atlanta. This is a CRIP recruitment exercise with hundreds of youth in an apartment complex in Atlanta. This is from their social media. This is not classified information. But what I want to try to communicate to this group is the nature of the threat is changing. These aren't neighborhood folks you can sit down with that are from your area, where regular patrol officers are able to grapple with it. This is a different type of organization with national and sometimes even international reach. Next slide. For those of you that watched the Super Bowl, a lot of law enforcement officers, specialists around the country were stunned when the halftime entertainment involved individuals showing CRIP symbology during the presentation. And what's interesting, if you look at the social media screenshot to the left, the individuals that I showed you in the prior picture are lauding this entertainer by saying this is the first major individual to actually display CRIP symbology in a major media event. And not just any major event, the most major sporting event in the United States. When those individuals from the previous slide congratulated the entertainer for making these symbols, he responded with a like to their comment. Next slide. After these national recruitment efforts here in Atlanta, this is what you see. These are a group that had been a neighborhood affiliated enterprise in Fulton County. And after the recruitment, then they all adopt the style and effect of that national organization. In this case, neighborhood Rolling 60s Crips, blue and the shirts and symbols that would be associated with that entity. Next slide. I mentioned that by having a national organization, a big box store or a national franchise, that raises the volume that they're capable of producing. It means more sophisticated weaponry, paramilitary organization style training and weapons. And instead of selling small amounts of drugs, graduating to large entire trash bags of dope that they're pushing through their criminal enterprise. Next slide. So I'm just a regular citizen, but I've been impressed with what Fulton County agencies have done. APD has reconstituted and enhanced its gang unit. The Fulton County Sheriff's Office has created its MACE organization, multi-agency criminal enterprise unit. And the Fulton County DA is increasing her resources directed towards gang RICO prosecution. As Ken said,
Don Geary with Fulton County, you're correct. We are increasing that unit as quickly as we can, and it's still underwater.
Yes, sir. But compared to preceding entities, I would say that your work towards the issue is astonishingly positive.
Thank you.
So you need these three things. You need law enforcement that can put together complex case files around criminal entities, and you need a district attorney's office that has the resources to receive those investigations and push forward with large scale RICO prosecution. And I'll defer to the representative from the DA's office to be more eloquent than I am on that issue. Next slide. So more positive commentary around the district attorney's office. They have been very involved in generating new legislation with the Georgia Assembly around increased powers for prosecutors to bring charges against criminal organizations, to go cross-county with their evidence and allow for more evidence to be exhibited. And again, I'll defer to the DA representative to add color to that comment. But I think it's something that people on this committee need to be aware of, because it's vital to us being able to tackle this nationalized, more sophisticated threat. Next slide. So why do I talk about gang warrants, and why do you hear Mr. Howard raise the concept of increased prosecution? Because if you look at the fact that crime has been surging, we don't have a surge in gang warrants that's commiserate with that crime surge. DA Willis has reached out to every law enforcement agency in Fulton County and requested that additional cases under the state's gang statute be brought to her office. And the reason why this is vital is I point to the historical achievements of Mayor Giuliani in New York, fighting the Cosa Nostra. And most historians, most legal historians, will point to the fact that he used RICO with his resources that he had available to tie up the organizational hierarchy of major criminal organizations operating in New York City at the time. And he is given credit, along with, for other reasons, achieving a dramatic improvement in Times Square.
Tom, if I can just add one thing,
Please.
One of the big reasons for that is under RICO, we need one act, either a predicate or an overt act under RICO in Fulton County to get jurisdiction or venue over almost anything else that happened in the state. So as long as we've got some criminal acts under RICO in Fulton, we can incorporate all of Metro Atlanta into a case in our courtroom.
And the reason I showed you the 30 Deep example is you didn't need that tool back then with that type of organization operating locally. Now, with the national hierarchies and deep benches and large memberships of these big box stores, they've spread their tentacles across the state. Next slide. Next. Yeah. Okay. So, and again, I'll defer to my colleague from the DA's office, but this is why warrants are important. Academic studies show unequivocally that if you can introduce gang evidence compliant with the statute, then the opportunities for convictions go up 300%. Next slide. This is simply to try to direct or shape the narrative. You hear a lot of commentary about crime in Atlanta. And yes, it is bad, but this is a national issue and it's surging everywhere. Next slide. So I throw this out for folks that think that, you know, we hear a lot about crime in Atlanta. This is according to some FBI statistics, but when I spend my time around the state, and I'm sure that Ken can attest to similar experiences, some such as Albany and Waynesboro are experiencing crime waves like they have never seen before. And that ties back to the concept of building the capacity and statutory capability of prosecutors to reach across jurisdictional lines and build large ranging RICO cases that take down these nationalized traditional gangs. Next slide. So one of the things that's happening, and along with the concepts that Mr. Howard brought up, is there was a recent study where the Department of Homeland Security reached out to every sheriff in the state of Georgia, and 159 out of 159 came back and said that gang violence was their #1 threat. And as a result, now I believe the wind is blowing in the right direction, whereby state, local, federal agencies, along with prosecutors, jails, correction, and training organizations are all working together to build the capacity in these various judicial districts and circuits so that more RICO cases can be brought around. And I think that's my last slide.
I do have a question, and please.
Well, before,
Sorry.
I have one, I want to make sure it was the last slide, because I was so impressed, Madam Chair, with the last week presentation on liquor licenses. So it's one thing to talk about crime being bad and what do we do about it. I think the value of conversations like these is just as in the liquor license conversation. So what do we do about this issue? And I think that it's similar to what Ken said, but I would maybe go even one step further and try to say that we need to hold agencies accountable to make more gang warrants, to make more gang indictments, and to give, not just hold them accountable, but give them the resources so that they can do that. Build the capacity if it doesn't currently exist, but if it does exist, give them the resources to be able to do more of these types of things. And I would say that Fulton is in a good position in the sense that the DA is very aggressive on this topic and is trying to bring on the resources to affect indictments using Georgia's Gang Act, which is the strongest in the United States. And I'll open it up to questions right after this. The other thing, and I'll defer to our representative from the DA's office, I don't think this has ever been used in Atlanta, but I believe that the law would allow for the Atlanta City Council and/or the county commission to request the DA or the county attorney to file civil gang injunctions to stop the activities of specified organizations in specific areas. So I'll leave it at that. I would open it up to any questions. Happy to do it here or offline at your convenience.
Okay, I do have a question, Mr. Ratchford. So after doing some extensive studying and looking into what these issues may be across America that we're seeing, is Eric Holder's FBI, they experienced a lot of issues in the jails in California. When that took place, they put a cap on all of the jails. And if anybody goes over that cap, the county is charged, a certain amount. And here in Atlanta, I believe that amount is $2 million. So then there's this rat race of like, how do we not go over the cap and get charged, but at the same time, not let out repeat violent criminals and do our due diligence within the same time frame? And then DA Fani trying to clean up DA Paul Howard's kind of mess that he left. So that is already a very difficult thing. But then you have not the state funds in each one of these states to actually address it, because we don't want to, we're already the biggest jail, like the most people incarcerated in the world are in the United States. So we're looking for answers. And I get, both sides of that argument. But right now it seems that we're in this loophole rat race to hurry up and do like a signature bond or unsecured judicial release or pretrial release so that we can hurry up and move people through, but we're not following through, and we don't have the resources to actually take those individuals who can be rehabilitated and actually do it the correct way. So it just seems like this big issue going round and round, all because of the cap. And I know that an overcrowded jail is a nightmare and it's ridiculous and it shouldn't happen. But we also don't have the funds to address it. And if you do discuss building another jail, that brings up, a whole huge argument and it becomes a big thing. So what do you think as citizens and as people who are wanting to see some of these things resolved, what can we do to either push for legislation, to address the issue, to bring up these points, to even maybe even have the feds look into it to see how they can adjust what that cap is and how they work with the certain counties so that they're not putting the citizenry at risk, but as well as not just keeping, more and more people going to jail where we've got half the United States jailed. So I don't know what you can offer us, but I'm willing to hear whatever you've got.
Well, I don't have any expertise around jail caps and criminal justice reform. I think that from my perspective, and the toolbox that's going to be used to deal with this situation will have a lot of different facets to it. In the narrow lane that I operate in, I would say emphasize the need to collaborate across agencies, state, federal, local, identify the senior leadership of the most violent organizations, work with prosecutors to build good cases against them, and put them in jail for a long time. In my narrow lane, I think that would make a difference.
And if I can put something in there, DA Willis has seen that problem as well. And she's put a lot of effort, not only on the side of gangs and putting gang members in prison, but focusing on the root problem being the lack of opportunity for certain groups in certain areas. So we are expanding greatly our diversion programs. We are looking for community partners. So directly to answer your question, community partners. If you or your organization has an opportunity that you think you could benefit, we are very interested as the DA's office to talk to you to see how we can expand these. We take someone who feels they've got no other option but being a gang, and they now have an opportunity. More times than not, they're going to follow that opportunity. So we're trying to find all solutions to the problem and not just incarceration.
And Ms. Carter, this is Colonel Pritchett with the Sheriff's Office. To speak just briefly to the cap, I'm not familiar with the cap. I know historically there was some issues around population in Fulton County, et cetera. Currently, Sheriff Labatt had to jump off, but I think he would say that we are going to take whoever is arrested, and obviously the sheriff does not have the purview to let people out. That is the judge's discretion to do that, whether it be bond or otherwise. But we're going to take and house whoever is arrested and brought into our custody. And that is why we're looking at alternative measures on places to hold people, right? So that we can make sure that we're holding everyone humanely, obviously, while they're going through this judicial process. And then what I would also say is that I've worked with Mr. Ratchford this year and last year with the gang database. We have investigators attached to the FBI task forces. We have an investigator that's working closely with the district attorney's office and Mr. Gary and his team on a grant. And Mr. Gary, you might want to talk a little bit more about that. But we're partnering with APD and other jurisdictions as well within Fulton County to try to curb some of this violent crime that is related to gang activity. So what I would say is that we are not going to turn people away at the back door based on population issue.
Thank you.
Well, I think Ken Howard said it best when he said this was a complex issue because it doesn't only have to do, as we all know, with violent crime. It has to do with so many things that put money into the coffers of these gangs, and they just continue to operate much more effectively in a lot of places than we do because we just don't have the money to match what they have. So you're right in that it will take a community effort, and that's what this whole entire task force is about. And hopefully some really good ideas will come out of this, but also some changes in practice and changes in strategies and methods to disrupt some of this behavior that's spilling over into this community. And with that in mind, I also want to, I know you didn't plan to speak or say anything tonight, Major Sinzer, but if you have anything that you wanted to add that would lend some light to this situation, we'd love to hear you.
Well, I mean, the speakers were very interesting. And, I just want to let you know that, when we can, and we do apply the Georgia gang statute and go RICO. I mean, I can't talk about specific ongoing cases right now, but, we do have several cases that are ongoing right now that impact Buckhead, where we've been able to make the nexus between individuals and drop that gang statute along with the other warrants to keep these individuals in jail up until they're fully prosecuted. So it is a tool that we use. It's a fantastic tool when we can make that nexus between the associates. So, I mean, the most important part for, initial part for, our agency is just to make sure that we're documenting everything when we come in contact with individuals, whether it's a routine traffic stop or suspicious person, or even with an arrest, and, try and figure out who they're working with and who their associates are, just to kind of stretch that web out as much as possible. So that's what we're really pushing with our guys.
I appreciate it. Thank you. With that, although I'm not so great at keeping us on time, I am on time right now. So Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you for the next part.
Sure. So I just wanted to let everybody know, and I'll send out calendar items for this, and for the next 3 meetings, and I'll give you the dates. No need to write them down. I'll send you the calendar items. But the last 3 meetings will all be at 6:30 p.m. They'll all be online. The one on March 24th, we'll have the Fulton DA's office and the Fulton County Sheriff as our presenters. On April 7th, we will have judges from the Superior Court, Magistrate Court, Municipal Court, and Juvenile Court to speak about their process, which I think will be really helpful to get that input as well. And Marta will present at that one also. And then on the 21st, our last meeting will be the Atlanta Police Foundation, Livable Buckhead, and then Simon's Properties, who own Lennox and Phipps. So those are our presenters for the rest of the way. And I will send out calendar items. So when you get a bunch of them, that's why. And I know that you may not know your availability this far in advance, but I did want to be able just to get on your calendars. And if ever you do not get the link for your direct link to get on this part of the meeting, always just let me know. And we're happy to get everybody all set. But I'll send out those calendar items. And that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. How about you, Mary? You have anything else?
Well, I just want to say that these presentations are really excellent, and that's why I'm working to transcribe them. And I look forward to our law enforcement officials and professionals getting together to produce a short and concise, but very informative document that we hope to do by May. These meetings will end up in March, April, and by May, we will be one of the very few in my many years at City Council that will produce something that is informative in a very short period of time with this many professional experts. So thank you all for participating. Thank you for being here tonight. And we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Deputy Chief?
Yes, Deputy Chief.
Hey, good evening, I should say. Great information. The only thing that I really want to put on there, just so that we have that accuracy on that one, and great information, Tom. When we talk about the actual gang unit for APD, I just really want this group to know that we never got rid of our gang unit, but it was titled differently. It was called a criminal intelligence unit. And so what we found is that when outside units, likewise with our narcotics unit, we attached it to our Apex unit at the time. But because we were getting those questions consistently about whether APD is working narcotics or whether APD is working gangs, we just changed the title back from criminal intel to gangs and changed Apex. We just call it narcotics again so that it makes it plain. One of the things that we'll do, and I won't go into detail, in 2019, we had a serious rise, in 2020, a serious rise of violent activity with murders and shootings. And it was gang related. This before DA Fonnie Willis was in office. So that's what brought about the partnership with the Atlanta Police Department and the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, where we instituted Operation Phoenix, where we took a large number of gang members off the street. And so now that unit has moved throughout the metro area now. So it was just Atlanta at first in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Now we've brought in all of our metro agencies to work closely. And of course, with GBI, we've always worked well with them and our state partners and all of our local. But I just wanted that to be known so that everybody understands where APD has been.
Thank you very much for updating on that. Well, Jim, if you have nothing else for me, if nobody else has anything, no more questions.
Let's adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
All in favor?
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
You too. Thank you.